Komisja Europejska uruchomiła wobec Polski.
The European Commission has launched the excess budget deficit procedure against Poland. Why? Because we have exceeded the permissible limit of the budget deficit, which is 3% of GDP. This means that we will have to present a savings plan. What are the procedures in this matter, and where will the Polish state find such savings? I'm checking.
Dzisiaj sprawdzam.
The Commission has identified 12 member states with deficits that exceed 3% of GDP. We have analyzed the reasons of the situation and concluded that the deficit criteria is not fulfilled in 7 member states: Belgium, France, Italy, Hungary, Malta, Slovakia and Poland.
This means that the Polish government must start saving money. The European Commission gave the green light for the excessive deficit procedure for Poland. Poland was among the countries whose budget deficit exceeded 3% of GDP. Poland is exceeding the deficit level of 3% due to our huge defence investments.
Potężnych nakładów na obronę.
The report presented today is only the first step in the process of opening the excessive deficit procedure. After considering the opinion of the Economic and Financial Committee, the European Commission intends to recommend to the European Union Council that the procedure be opened in July. Speaking in the same, Donald Tusk said he would not be played by Brussels, but in fact he has been played by his friend. History has come full circle. 14 years ago, when Tusk was Prime Minister, the European Commission also came up with the excessive deficit procedure against Poland. In fact, the government underestimated expenses for last year, so it had to spend more this year, which resulted in an increase in the budget hole.
W poprzednim roku, żeby zwiększyć je w tym roku, a tym samym powiększono deficyt w poprzednim roku.
The government justified that the current budget hole results from Poland's large but necessary defence spending. The main problem is the state income. We have too little revenue for the state budget. There is a VAT hole. We should have an average of 28 billion zloty a month by the end of the year, but we have 22 billion. We have a rising minimum wage, we have rising energy costs, which causes companies to flee the country or reduce their activities, which in turn limits the state income. But where will the government start looking for savings now? Of course, you can wonder where to cut it and who to take it from, and it's usually taken from those who don't burn tyres. The poorest people are most likely to suffer, and the government will certainly have to solve the problem. If a member state does not comply with the recommendations, the Council may decide to proceed to the next stage of the excessive deficit procedure, with the final option being the imposition of financial sanctions on Poland. The deficits are mainly a legacy of the COVID pandemic and the energy price crisis that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. France is in the spotlight because it is the European Union's second largest economy and faces political turmoil after President Emmanuel Macron calls snap national elections for June the 30th to July the 7th in response to his party's poor results in the European parliamentary elections. France had a budget deficit of 5.5% of gross domestic product in 2023, which is expected to narrow only slightly to 5.3% this year, still well above the EU deficit limit of 3% of GDP. French public deficit was 110.6% of GDP in 2023, and the Commission expects it to increase to 112.4% this year and 113.8% in 2025. This is almost twice the EU limit of 60%.
Today's report is the first step in the process of opening an EDP. It will be for the Council in July to adopt a decision establishing the existence of an excessive deficit in those member states, and the EDP recommendation on the correction of the excessive deficit will be proposed only in November or in autumn to ensure consistency with the adjustment path set out in the medium-term plans that, meanwhile, we will be discussing.
Talks between Paris and the Commission on how quickly to reduce France's deficit and debt will take place in the coming months after the European Union executive proposes to Paris a 7-year path to put the deficit on a downward path.